What's up, Food Network fans? I'm Dan Langen, and we're back here with another Friendsgiving Live here on Food Network's Facebook page. And so what I'm doing tonight is creating a cake inspired by one of my favorite bring-alongs to Friendsgiving, which is wine, right? You can't really go wrong with wine if you don't know what to bring to your Friendsgiving. Wine makes everybody happy, and nobody's going to complain. So what I'm doing here is making a wine crate cake. It's not just a wine bottle, it's an actual wooden crate with a nice bottle of wine in it. It's a pretty cool design. It's pretty hip. It's a cake I've made quite a few times and always gets rave reviews. So to make this wine crate cake, what I typically do is start with 2 half sheets of cake, and then I cut the half sheets down lengthwise, and I kind of get these 2 longer quarter sheets, and I stack them up. I'm filling this one, which is obviously Devil's Food Cake. I'm filling it with some chocolate buttercream that I made with black cocoa, which is like a super Dutched cocoa. So it turns this dark black color. So I'm just using a pastry bag to fill this so that I don't have to really even get a spatula involved. And then I'll just stack these cakes up. And I'm putting this cake together on a cake board that I've cut to like a really specific size. It's just a 1/4 inch bigger than all of my cake slices. And what that allows me to do is kind of have like a nice border of buttercream once I go to frost this, because as you can see with the crumb coated version that I already have, I'm looking for a really squared off cake with nice sharp corners and nice 90-degree angles to really get the look of this like boxy cake. So that's really important. So if you guys have never seen my videos before, or you've never seen my Facebook page is Baked by Dan, and it is linked at the top of this video. So make sure to check it out, because I do these lives every week, and you guys can kind of get the inside scoop of what's to come or when I'm going live if you just follow me on there. So let me just grab a little spatula here. Give this little spread. This top coat will be just a little bit lighter than the other few. But just so you guys can get an idea, this is how you would get this shape. 2 half sheet cakes, so that's 2 batches of whatever cake you would like to use. You just cut them until they're long 1/4 sheets. So you just cut that half sheet long way straight down the center. And then if you're working with chilled cake and a nice spreadable buttercream, it'll be super easy to get this nice wine crate shape. You'll chill your cake, give it a nice buttercream coat, and then you can move right along to adding those wood planks and making this whole thing look like a wine crate, which is what I'm going to show you guys here how to do. So that's it. That is how you get the shape, crumb coat it, and you end up with this right here. Pretty simple. So I like to crumb coat my cakes like this and then let them chill overnight, because they get nice and cold. And if your cake is nice and cold, it's so much easier to work with, right? So let me just move this out of the way. I'll get rid of these cake crumbs. Slide this out the way here. So what I have to do is cover my wine bottle. And I'm gonna do that like right away, because this cake is fresh out of the fridge, so I want my wine bottle to really stay nice and cold. I want the buttercream to be nice and firm once I cover it. And this wine bottle shape was actually super easy to make. All I did was take some extra cake that I had, mix it with a little bit of buttercream to make kind of like a cake pop type mix, and then I just pressed it into this chocolate mold. So this is just a chocolate mold. It's actually a champagne bottle mold, but kind of the same thing. Not too much of a difference. So I lined my champagne bottle mold with some plastic wrap, and I pressed the cake pop mix into it. Of course, chilled it so it got nice and firm, gave it a crumb coat, and that is what you see right there. So what I'm gonna do, as per usual, is just give my cake a mist with a little bit of vodka. And one thing I just want to point out, just to make this shape as realistic as possible, I did cut kind of like a half circle out of the bottom. This is the punt of the wine bottle. It's that part that kind of indents in towards the bottom. So when I roll my fondant out, I can press it into the bottom there. So when you see this cake and you see this wine bottle, it'll have a nice realistic shape. So here I have some black fondant, and I'm just going to give it a knead until it's nice and stretchy. Once the colder months hit and everything's kind of like really cold in the kitchen, I always like to microwave my fondant especially if it feels really stiff, because it kind of speeds up the kneading process. It kind of cuts down on the amount of time that I have to knead the fondant to get it to like a workable consistency, which is pretty much like this, when you can pull it and it's like a huge thing of bubble gum. It's stretchy, it's not ripping. That's exactly what you want, because you need the fondant to be flexible once it gets on your cake. So for this wine bottle cake, I've used just straight black fondant, which is what this is. I've used a mixture of like a dark green and black fondant, which I guess looks more like a champagne bottle probably. You could use whatever shade of dark green or black you like, but I always like to try and go really light on the cornstarch, just because I don't want to dull this color. But after I get the bottle covered, what I'm going to do is just brush it with a little bit of vegetable oil to make it shiny, like glass. So if there is, like an excess of cornstarch, it, pretty much disappears. But I still like to keep this top as cornstarch free as I can, which you can see, you don't really need cornstarch on top of your fondant all the time. So it depends on, how sticky the fondant is or whatever kind of fondant you're using. But if you can get away with no cornstarch, then, you don't have to go messing up the color of your fondant. So I'll roll this out nice and thin. So as I said, I just molded that bottle with a chocolate mold. You just take cake pop mix, which you can find a ton of, recipes and ratios online for. It's just crumbled up cake and buttercream. I put it in my mold, gave it a crumb coat, and I want to try and roll this out pretty thin, because I don't want to really lose that fine shape, especially on the neck of the wine bottle. So if you guys have any questions about what I'm doing, or questions about baking cake, or questions just about like Thanksgiving baking in general, feel free to leave your questions in the comments below. I'll try and answer them after this broadcast if I can. Or you can always hit me up on my Facebook page or Instagram @BakedByDan, and I'll answer your questions there. So this looks pretty thin. This black is actually pretty stiff. It's taking a lot of effort to really get it nice and thin, but that looks good. Just about 1/8 of an inch thick. So what I'll do is move my cornstarch out of the way. My cake is it's put together on a piece of foam core board. So it has a nice solid base. You never just want to have a cake without a base, because when you try and pick your cake up, the whole thing would just kind of collapse. It wouldn't be too good. So just like that, I just roll the fondant over the cake. I'll just smooth it out. I want to pay particular attention to the top here, where I just added a little band of fondant to kind of define the shape that I was looking for here. So I'll just press it into place. Let me grab my fondant smoother to help with that. Good. And then I'll also start to press the fondant into the bottom right down here. Just so I can keep that shape that I talked about earlier, and then I'll just smooth out these wrinkles, smooth that into place. So if you ever find that your fondant is cracking, it might just be too dry, and one really easy thing to do is just knead some vegetable shortening into the fondant, and usually that kind of takes care of the cracking. Sometimes darker colors will crack a little bit more than lighter colors, just because there's so much liquid added to the fondant in the form of food coloring, but it really just depends on the type of fondant you're using. All right, so what I'm gonna do is just cut away some of this extra, since I know I don't need it. Then I'll just give this a bit more of a smooth. So I always like to cover my cakes while they're on parchment paper, and then when I cut the fondant off, the parchment paper kind of cuts as well. So get rid of that as you're working on working on taking the extra fondant. So now that I have all that extra gone, I can really start to smooth the bottom here and press that fondant into the bottom of the bottle. And once this bottle is sitting in the actual like wine crate, it's going to have there's like wood shavings around it that they package wine bottles in. It's actually going to be toasted coconut. It's not going to be wood shavings tonight because this is a cake. But my point is that the bottom edge of this won't be visible because of the illusion that the bottle is sitting, you know, in a wine crate with wood shavings. So the bottom edge of this, not too important how it looks, but I'm just using a sculpting tool just to make sure that this fondant is pressed really nicely and nice and sharp along the bottom edge of the cake. And then I'll just run it straight down the side of the bottle and cut the extra off. And then once I get this covered, I'm just going to set this aside until I'm ready for it. So I'll do the same thing here. Use my sculpting tool and cut that extra away and then kind of push it under. Got a little bit of cracking right there, but I'll just smooth that out a little later. Same thing in the front here, take this excess off. So I'll peel that excess away. And then I'll just press this under. Cool, that looks nice and smooth. I don't think I even need to smooth it anymore. So that is the wine bottle here. And obviously I only have the top half because the other half would be in the crate. So just working with this top half. And I will set this aside. Leave it right there. I'll gather up this extra fondant and put it away. You can always save your extra fondant scraps. As long as you wrap them back up, you can save them and use them for another project. So now what I have to do is get to working on the wooden panels that are actually going to go on this cake and make it look like, you know, a wood crate. So these are actually super easy to make. All you have to do is take some fondant. I like to use white. You just take some white fondant, you roll it out, and you let it dry for about 2 days until it's nice and stiff. You just start with all 90-degree angles, so I know that this is nice and squared off. I used a ruler to cut everything. And I like to measure my cake, so if my cake is 16 inches long, I'll make long panels that are 16.5 inches, just so I have just a little bit of overhang. And then once you put all the panels on, you can cut them exactly how long you need them. So to get this wood look, what I'm going to do is take some ivory food color, and right on top of my white, I'm just going to put some full strength ivory food color. And you kind of just tap it into place. You really want to work it onto the fondant there. And then what I like to do is take some diluted ivory food color and a little bit of a light colored cocoa powder, like a natural cocoa, and I mix that together with some vodka just to make kind of like a wash. And then you paint over the fondant here, and you get this really nice effect. Looks like real wood. So I'm going to take my vodka wash here, paint over the white fondant. You can kind of like swirl it around a little bit, but you always want to paint in one direction. So I'm just following the, kind of like what the wood grain would be, and then I just make sure I paint what would be the top side or the bottom side. Just like that. And then this takes a little bit of time to dry, but that easily you get this really awesome wood effect. And you want to let it dry until it's not sticky, until it's not shiny, and that is how you get these wood planks that you can attach to your cake. So I'll just set this aside over here. So what I want to do is take my cake, which has been coated in buttercream. It's got nice straight sides and nice 90-degree angles, and what I want to start with is these side panels. So I'll take some buttercream, and what I'm going to do is grab my fondant smoother and just put some buttercream on the sides of the cake. I think usually 3 strips is about enough. I don't want to go all the way over the top though, so I'll stop before I get to the top. And I'll take my wood panels and I'll line up one side so it's right to the edge. of where the cake is, and I'll press this into place. So fondant smoother is really helpful for this because it's flat and it really gets the panel where it needs to be. So I'll just press that in place there, and then I'm going to grab a sharp knife and a ruler. And I left myself a little bit of overhang right there, so I'll just cut that off. So I'll do that just like this, trying to figure out the best way to. So you want to use something that has like a nice 90-degree angle so you can get a nice straight cut. Whenever you're working on square cakes, it's all about getting everything nice and lined up and nice and squared off. So if you make your panels and you dry them overnight, that's how you achieve that really squared off look. Super important. All right, so I'll do the same thing on the other side. 3 stripes of buttercream all the way down. Grab my panel. I'll line one side up straight so I don't have to cut it. Press that into place using my fondant smoother. And then after you press it, you always have to make sure you didn't kind of knock your panel out of place. So I'll just use this just to make sure everything's lined up. It's lined up straight on the bottom. So again, I'll just grab my craft knife and a ruler. And don't forget, if you guys are just joining and you're not, or you didn't get to see the very beginning of this video, you can always just share this video on your Facebook page, and then you can watch it after, if you decide to create this cake. And like I said, if you have any questions about anything I'm doing here, just let me know in the comments below, or just feel free to hit me up on my Facebook, which is Baked by Dan. Cool, so that looks good. Just brush away any extra little pieces of fondant. And then I want to do the same thing with the front panels. I like to put the front panels on last because then when you're looking at the cake straight on, you don't really see where the seam of the fondant is because the front panels are covering up the edges that just got cut that I just added on there. So I'll put a little more buttercream on this side because it's a little longer. And I'll just grab one of my larger panels. Press that into place, and I may not have to, wow, look at that. I actually don't even have to trim these at all. These fit this one at least fits pretty snug, so that's awesome. So same thing, I'll just press this into place. I may have to trim just a little bit, but press this into place. So oftentimes when I'm working on cakes, I'll use ganache. So I coat the whole cake in ganache, and then it's really firm and it's really sturdy. It's really nice to work with and cover in fondant. This is a buttercream cake, so I'm just using buttercream to attach. But if you were to attempt this cake with ganache, all you would have to do is just use even more ganache then to attach your panels to your cake. And then if any buttercream or anything peeks out or any little crumbs of fondant or whatever, you can just brush them away with a pastry brush. All right, let's see if I'm lucky enough to get this last one to line up perfectly with no need for trimming. So just a little buttercream to get that to stick. I'll grab my last panel. Looks like that one's pretty good too. So here's a little tip. If you're ever creating a cake like this, you're creating a square cake or whatever it may be, and you're cutting out these panels to, attach them to your cake in this manner, if your panels aren't drying in time, you can actually just place your panels on like a silicone baking mat onto a baking sheet that's large enough to hold them, and you can pop them in the oven at about 150 degrees or 170 degrees Fahrenheit, basically as low as your oven will go, for about 10 to 15 minutes. And what it's going to do at first is make your fondant soft, but as the fondant cools, it's actually going to dry really quick. So if you're kind of in a pinch and you need your fondant to dry for a decoration or something like this, you can bake it at a low temp for 15 to 20 minutes, or I'm sorry, 10 to 15 minutes, and you'll be good to go. All right, so that's how easy it is to get that wooden crate look. It looks awesome. So with your cake nice and straight and your panels pre-made, you can get this nice squared off look. So what I want to do now is come back to my wine bottle, and I created an edible image online, or actually just not online, on my computer. I just took some edible image paper and just printed out a little label here for my wine bottle. So let's pick that up there. And what I'm going to do to attach it to my bottle is just take a little bit of vegetable shortening. I'll just spread some of this right towards the bottom center of the cake. And I like to use the vegetable shortening here because if I end up not liking how this label goes on, I can just peel it off. But I'll try and center this as best I can. And then press that into place. Just like that. So you could also just cut out a strip of fondant and use some food gel or like edible markers and create a label for the wine bottle. That would totally work too. But if you have an edible printer, it's a great excuse to use it. So to get this to stick on top of my cake, just right on top of the buttercream, I'm just going to place some fresh soft buttercream. I'll pick my wine bottle cake up. Clean up any edges here since I kind of have it in the air. And then I'll just drop this into place. Boom, just like that. Awesome. Try not to get buttercream on the fondant, but if you do, you can just wipe it right off. Then what I'm going to do to make my bottle nice and shiny is take a little bit of vegetable oil cooking spray. This is one of my favorite tricks. And I'll just take a nice clean paintbrush. This is just a fan brush, and then I'll just brush it right onto the fondant and get this really awesome glassy look. Looks like a mirror. It's super reflective, so it really sets the tone that this is an actual wine bottle. And sometimes you have to do a couple coats here depending on the fondant. If your fondant's super absorbent, sometimes it just will absorb the first coat of the vegetable oil spray, so you kind of just have to go back and add another coat. So, and I like to do this after I add the label or anything else that I would add, just because once you do this, the fondant is obviously pretty slick, and it's, you know, challenging at that point to try and attach anything else to the fondant. So this is like the last thing you want to do. And then, like I said, this bottom edge here, you're not even going to see once we add the toasted coconut, which is the kind of wood shavings that the wine bottle would be packaged in. So let's see, I don't think I missed any spots there. And if you end up smudging this, no big deal. All you have to do is just brush right back over it with just a little more of the vegetable oil spray, and it kind of just like smooths itself out. Awesome. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is just grab my airbrush, and I just want to clean up any spots on these wood panels that may have kind of like smudged or where color might have built up from painting them. So I'll just take a little bit of ivory airbrush color, and I just want to airbrush. Let's see, I'll do this like this. I just want to airbrush towards the top of the wood. Like I said, just to clean up, you know, where anything may have smudged, or if you can see any white spots from cutting those panels, this is the time to just clean them up. And an airbrush makes super easy work of this because you don't end up getting any brush strokes or anything like that. So like I said, I'm using toasted coconut here, so I basically just spread some coconut on a baking sheet, a nice clean half sheet, and set my oven to 350. After it was preheated, I just put the coconut in there, and it took about probably 10 or 12 minutes to get some sweetened coconut toasted to this point here. So I have it in a measuring cup so that it's nice and easy to kind of pour it where I need to go. Of course, I want it to go on just the bottom part of the crate here, and I don't want it to end up sticking to the wine bottle, so I'll try and be really careful here. And I'll add some to the bottom. So this just took about 2 cups of coconut just to make enough to be able to fill in the spaces in this crate. So I'll put on 1 layer, and then I'll kind of go back and spread it out, get it where it needs to be. And if you don't want to use coconut, or you're allergic to coconut, or you just, don't like it, you can also just use modeling chocolate or fondant for this and just cut it into really fine strips. You can run it through, I guess, like the spaghetti setting or the fettuccine setting of a pasta machine if you have one of those. I've done that in the past for this. Or you can just, use coconut. Whatever you want to do, you'll still get the idea across that, it's like the wood shavings in your wine crate. So I'll put just a little more right here. So if you guys are creating any Friendsgiving desserts or Thanksgiving desserts and you have any photos, feel free to share them below so we can all check it out, so everyone can get some inspiration for what they can create. I know that this weekend, right before Thanksgiving, is actually a really popular Friendsgiving weekend. So I'm sure everyone's busy getting ready for their Friendsgiving and even Thanksgiving, because that's just like days away at this point. Alrighty. So I really like how that looks. I have a nice thin layer of the coconut here. None of that buttercream is peeking through. And the bottom edge of the fondant on this wine bottle cake is completely covered up. So just like I said, there we go. It's exactly what we're going for. And now at this point, all I want to do, just to add just a little more detail, is just take an open piping tip, and I'm just going to really lightly kind of press it into the front of this wood panel right here, just to create the look of like a little screw or a little bracket. And if they press in unevenly, that's fine, because I want this to look really rustic and like handmade. So I'll just keep these even, try and space them evenly, I should say. Press them in just like that. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of gold luster dust. And I like to mix luster dust just in like a measuring spoon sometimes, because it's a super easy way to keep it exactly where you need it. It's the perfect little container. So I add just a couple touches of vodka to that, just to make it a nice like paintable consistency, just like that there. So I'll just swirl it around, I'll get some on my brush, and then I'm just gonna go back in here and just paint into the center of these. So this is just like a really minor detail, but just adds a little more color, it adds a nice look. And the gray over top of the ivory color looks almost like antique-y. So I think it's really cool. All right, I'll do the same thing on this side. And I'll just finish up with this one right here. Cool. All right, and then finally, I have some fondant grapes that I created just by mixing together some purple fondant and some red fondant, and I put each one on a wire and then gathered all those wires together to make a stack of grapes. And whenever I do this, I always like to have some extra grape colored fondant, and I'll take some of it, I'll knead it with a little bit of vegetable shortening until it's nice and pliable, and I'll make just a few more of the grapes, and then I kind of just set them in any spots that I think look a little too bare. So this kind of will just fill out this little bunch of grapes a little bit more, and then I think this wine crate cake is totally Friendsgiving ready. So if you guys are getting ready for your Friendsgiving, let us know in the comments below what you're making. I had my Friendsgiving last week. It was one of my all-time favorite get-togethers that I've ever had. It was super successful. The food was awesome. The crowd was awesome. So no Friendsgiving for me this weekend because I had mine last week. It was awesome. So let's see. I'll place one of those right down there. So to get this color, I just mixed together some purple and some burgundy, I believe it was. I wanted these a little bit brighter than normal, but you know, you could make your fondant grapes whatever shade you want to make them. Just one more right there. And if you want these to be shiny, you can brush them with a little bit of vegetable shortening. If you want them to be a little more matte, you could actually just brush them with some cornstarch. So kind of like the opposite of what you typically do with your fondant. You want to brush that cornstarch off, but if you are looking for that kind of like dry, waxy grape look that some grapes have, a little bit of cornstarch actually just does the trick. All right, I really like how that looks. You guys get the picture. There you go. So this is my Friendsgiving inspired wine crate cake. And as beautiful as it is, and as much as I don't want to cut into it because it looks so nice, I will cut into it because I want you guys to see what it looks like on the inside. So let me just get something to place this on, and I'll get a nice sharp knife. And don't forget, if you guys have questions about this, I can answer them after the broadcast, so feel free to put your questions in the comments below. And don't forget to share this video so you can check it out later and so your friends can check it out as well. There we go. So I think, let's take a slice from right back here. I actually love chocolate and coconut together, so to me this is the perfect combo. But like I said, if you're not a big coconut lover, there are other things you could use to get this look. Chocolate and coconut. So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you had a lot of fun watching it. I certainly had a lot of fun putting this cake together. This wine crate cake is one of my favorite designs because it's pretty simple, but it's timeless, it's classic, and everybody always loves it. So like I said, if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Have an awesome Friendsgiving. Have an awesome Thanksgiving next weekend. And I'll see you guys all soon. Thanks for watching.